Egyptian President Anwar Sadat instituted a mass roundup of opponents, including Pope Shenouda III, the head of the Egyptian Coptic Christian Church. A few days later, he headed south to attend the Diamond Jubilee of King Sobhuza II of Swaziland, the first monarch in the world since Queen Victoria to remain on the throne for 60 years. The 17-year-old Jamaican-born footballer named John Barnes made his league debut for Watford. He would go on to play for Liverpool and England, and would only be the second black player to play for Liverpool and the first to do so regularly. Stephen King's novel Cujo, about a rabid St. Bernard dog, was published and was an instant bestseller, though some critics complained about the downer ending, and the end of the 1983 movie based on the book is notably more optimistic. Picasso's famous painting Guernica was transferred back to Madrid from its previous home in New York's Museum of Modern Art in the utmost secrecy to foil potential thieves, and the Hanna-Barbera series The Smurfs debuted on network TV. It would run until 1989 and become part of worldwide pop culture. Everyone in F1 was happy to return to Monza after the Italian Grand Prix had had a year in exile at Imola, and the local teams were particularly hoping to please the fans. Azella had a new car for Jarier, the FA1C, while Ferrari was still tinkering with their chassis in an attempt to fix whatever was wrong with it. Meanwhile, Alfa Romeo, who had been promising all season that there was a new turbocharged engine in the offing, still had nothing to show, but had signed up Gerard Ducarouge and he'd made some refinements to the chassis. De Cesaris crashed again on Friday morning, but apparently didn't demolish the chassis as thoroughly as at Zandvoort, and the long-suffering mechanics rebuilt it for him, probably wondering why they were bothering. Pironi also had a big off at the start of qualifying, professing himself mystified as to why his Ferrari had just snapped out on him at the Lesmos corners. He took the spare car to have another go, which meant it wasn't available for Villeneuve when he had a turbo failure later in the session. While all this was going on, René Arnoux put his Renault on pole once again, but a fired-up Carlos Reutemann managed to qualify second and split the two yellow cars, pushing Prost down to third. Lafitte joined his countrymen on row 2 of the grid, with Jones fifth, nursing a broken finger and some bruising after getting into a fight in London, and Piquet was sixth. Watson was seventh and would start in the spare McLaren after his race car had an oil leak, and Pironi was the top Italian representation in 8th place in the Ferrari. Villeneuve was 9th and Giacomelli 10th, while down at the back there was an unfamiliar sight. Brian Henton had actually dragged his Toleman onto the grid in 23rd place. The Toleman team couldn't celebrate too hard though, as they had a lot of work to do before the race. The unlucky Siegfried Storr would miss his last race after a nasty shunt in qualifying, and would join Sira, Gabbiani, Warwick and the increasingly forlorn Fittipaldi twins in watching from the sidelines on Sunday. Italian enthusiasm for the return to Monza was thus rather dampened by the indifferent performances of their cars and drivers, and Sunday dawned grey, misty and overcast to boot, but you can't keep an Italian from their motorsport for long, and there was still a solid crowd to watch the race. As the lights went green, Reutemann threw away his excellent qualifying performance with a sluggish start and was swamped by the two Renaults. He quickly recovered second from Arnoux, but the fans at the track only had eyes for the red Ferrari of Didier Pironi, shooting up from 8th to 4th, then following Reutemann through for third just before the Variante della Roggia. A couple of corners later, and he was past the Williams for second, and the crowd erupted. At the end of that first lap then, Prost was already pulling out a decent lead, with Pironi second, Reutemann in third and now fending off Arnoux, with Jones and Lafitte dicing for fifth behind them. Soon enough, though, Pironi was leading those three other cars in a little train, as Prost disappeared into the distance. Lafitte got ahead of Jones, who also dropped behind a charging Villeneuve. Piquet, meanwhile, had had an indifferent start and was down in 9th. At the start of lap 4, Arnoux outgrunted Reutemann down the start-finish straight to take third and disposed of Pironi the following lap. Lafitte followed through as Arnoux began to show the rest of the field a clean pair of rear tyres, and not long afterwards Villeneuve's Ferrari emitted a plume of blue smoke and turned round to the pits to retire, scratch one championship contender. So the top three were all French drivers in French cars with French engines, Prost, Arnoux and Lafitte, followed by another Frenchman in an Italian car, Pironi. Reutemann had regained 5th, with Giacomelli now up to 6th. Not for long though, as Lafitte was having some tyre problems and dropped back, with Reutemann getting past both Pironi and the Ligier to take third. Jones and Piquet were also steadily moving up, and soon a four-way battle evolved as they arrived to overtake Pironi and Lafitte. The two Frenchmen were quickly disposed of, and Lafitte soon found himself in a gravel trap with seriously blistered tyres. Slim Borgard was climbing out of his ATS at the same time, caught out by a sudden light rain shower at the back end of the circuit. The rain wasn't heavy enough to switch to wet tyres and wasn't everywhere on the circuit, but it was making the already tricky Curva Parabolica rather slippery, and caught Eddie Cheever out too on the next time round. Coming to rest on the track, Cheever couldn't get it started and hopped out. Jones had got past Reutemann to go third, which became second on lap 14 when Arnoux came across Cheever's abandoned Tyrrell and swerved into the gravel trap while avoiding it. Unconnected to all of this, Salazar's race also ended in the gravel at the Curva Grande when his tyre blew out. About the only driver enjoying all of this was Bruno Giacomelli, who made his living skidding Alfa Romeos around test tracks, and he got past Pironi, then Reutemann to go third, which cheered the crowd up no end. Another man doing well in the wet was Patrick Tambay, who got past Watson, then overtook Pironi for fifth and set off after Piquet, taking fourth at the first chicane as they came to lap Alboretto's Tyrrell on lap 17. Pironi and Piquet were having a terrific scrap as Tambay disappeared into the distance, with John Watson close behind waiting to pounce. On lap 20, Watty got a little wide coming out of the second Lesmo and spun into the wall, destroying his car in spectacular fashion. Bits of car narrowly missed the following Reutemann, but Alboretto wasn't so lucky and was also out. That Watson was shaken up but unhurt was a testament to the strength and energy absorption properties of the new carbon fibre monocoque. Tambay's fine drive, his best showing so far for Ligier, came to an untimely end on lap 23 with a puncture, and at about half distance it was Giacomelli's turn for the bad luck as his car got stuck in fifth gear, and he dived into the pits, promoting Piquet to third, Pironi fourth, Reutemann to fifth, and Andretti to sixth, with a resurgent De Cesaris chasing. Giacomelli returned to the track a lap down, did a couple of laps, came back in, lost another lap, and went out again. The track was drying out now, and Reutemann sped up again, leaving Andretti behind and catching back up to Pironi, getting past on lap 38 and setting off in pursuit of his championship rival Piquet. Andretti put the cap on another disappointing weekend for Alfa Romeo, pulling into the pits with an engine failure on lap 41. With 10 laps to go, Reutemann was steadily reeling Piquet in with a 7-second gap, but it wasn't happening quickly enough, especially when Piquet responded and the gap was still 5 seconds on the penultimate lap. And then Piquet's engine exploded on the very last lap. Reutemann gratefully lunged through to take third, while Jones tiptoed over the line for second with a very rough-sounding Ford DFV of his own. Piquet pulled over, watching Pironi and De Angelis sail past. De Cesaris should have had the last point, a reward for a circumspect drive when others had crashed, but was punted off with a tyre blowout on his last lap, so Piquet, the last man on the lead lap, got one consolation point for sixth place. De Cesaris was classified 7th, with Giacomelli 8th, and the only other two finishers were Jarier and Henton, both giving their cars valuable full race distance, a new car for Azella and a first qualification for Tollman. So Reutemann once again edged into the championship lead, with Prost now moving up to third in the standings and having the momentum with him for a late title charge, and Williams, with their 2-3 finish, had almost sewn up the Constructors' title. Brabham would need 1-2 finishes at both remaining Grand Prix, with Williams not scoring at all in order to overhaul them.